What is going on, Benzinga Nation? And welcome to our conversation here today. The EV sector is so talked about. It's been talked about for quite some time, but you also always have like the popular names in terms of like the Teslas and the Rivians and the Fords and the GMs that are kind of the only ones that get love when it comes to this space. But there are also other companies where you might be able to get some exposure. You might have some companies that are the thing behind the thing that, yeah, they can help out in the EV space, but there's so many other ways to use your technology. And that's what this conversation here, that's what this show today is about. And to start things off, we've got Dr. Denis Phares, who is a CEO of Dragonfly Energy Holdings. Ticker is DFLI. Dr. Phares, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Zaid.
You know, we've had some great conversations in the past. I'm expecting just that because like I mentioned, like there's so many different ways to use the technology that, yeah, it's in the EV space, but there's different ways to utilize it as well. But before we kind of dive into nitty gritty of things, tell the folks at home, what is it that your company does?
Sure. Well, I'm here today with you because we make batteries. And of course, lithium-ion batteries are critical for electric vehicles. And so that's what we are. We're a lithium-ion battery technology company. We do everything from the fundamental chemistry to the manufacturing processes for developing better ways to make the cells themselves. Yeah. We package the cells into packs, and we sell the packs and systems directly into the aftermarket or through distribution or to OEMs.
Now, I know you have a $30 million licensing deal that came about as well. Tell me a little bit more about this partnership, especially how it influences your growth as you close out the year and obviously going into next year as well.
Yeah, well, this was a pure brand licensing deal. So this Dragonfly Energy has a brand that we called Battleborn Batteries, named after the Battleborn state of Nevada where we live. And the brand became very, very popular, developed a great reputation because of what we do in terms of quality and customer service and design and that sort of thing. And the brand kind of bubbled to the surface when Stryten Energy was looking to go to market in the lithium space with a brand. And they pinpointed Battleborn Batteries as the go-to brand. And so we came up with an arrangement where they can actually use our brand in their markets. For us, it's like we're getting paid for increased exposure of our Battleborn Batteries brand. So it was a great opportunity. And Stryten is, of course, a well-known large battery company. They do all sorts of things in the lead acid battery space, as well as things like vanadium flow batteries and some lithium. And so it's a great partnership for us. And we see this as sort of the beginning of a much longer term partnership where we're able to deliver not just a brand, but also products and technology.
Now, with everything that's happening in the technology side of things with the batteries as well, right? You have many different use cases. What do you think we're headed in terms of the future of batteries? What direction do you think the demand is going to go into? And also, more importantly than that, how is Dragonfly positioning itself to take advantage of this dynamic space of batteries?
Well, demand's going to go up. It's the EV market may wax and wane a little bit, but the demand for storage is going to go up because you need it in everything from, not just propulsion, but grid stabilization and anything off grid, for example. The batteries are the future, and particularly lithium-ion batteries, because it's quite simply, it's the most energy dense battery that you can make is with lithium-ion chemistries. So where Dragonfly fits into all this is we are working hard, first of all, to proliferate the usage of lithium-ion batteries in all kinds of applications beyond our core RV applications that we're most well known for. But also we're working on the front end in terms of making the batteries, figuring out how to make them cheaper, and more importantly, how to make them domestically.
And when you make them domestically, does it impact any way in terms of, say, margins or profitability or anything like that? Or is it the qualities are kind of focused on that side?
Well, in terms of the battery packs that we assemble here today domestically, certainly we have a leg up in terms of our ability to maintain quality because we identify and scope out and test every component that goes into it. Yeah. When it comes to actually domestic production of lithium-ion cells, the costs get much higher. And that's why you need a step function improvement in the manufacturing process. You need to increase the efficiencies associated with the manufacturing. And those are the technologies that we're developing in-house.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that is because, oftentimes I remember growing up, it was kind of like a pride thing where it's made in the USA. But now it's also, as I've gotten older and I recognize, hey, you got to pay for quality and make sure that things don't just, they last a very long time, especially when it comes to batteries, when it comes to the important things that we need in our lives. That's why the quality aspect of it to me is very important. And I'm glad you guys are focusing on that. It also looks like you're diversifying your product line. So tell me a little bit about the different segments of this industry that you're most excited about.
Yeah, well, we were very successful at, for example, developing the lithium market in the RV space. So we are most well known for that. But now we obviously need to diversify because look, this market is gonna reward execution. We're beyond the days of free money where people are gonna put in money for the hope of something to come in the future. We need to execute today. So we've expanded into, for example, the heavy duty trucking market. We've identified a market that is ripe for a solution, precisely the type of the solution that we develop here. So our electric APU unit, for example, has an immediate ROI for the fleets. And so we're working with owner operators, with fleets, and ultimately with the upfit centers and with the OEMs as well. The other vertical that we've really worked to penetrate is in oil and gas, and particularly in terms of off-grid methane recovery. So when you think about the transfer of gas in pipelines, there are leakage points. And so the ability to actually recollect the methane and prevent it from getting into the atmosphere is something that the government is actually regulating now through the Methane Emissions Recovery Program, through the EPA. So it's another opportunity for us to deploy storage in niche markets you wouldn't have known, prior. So it's great for us to be able to address these with new technologies.
You mentioned regulation. Are you at all concerned with any regulations that might come down the pipeline? We have obviously it's an election year, right? Less than, I think, 70 days to go. No matter who wins, are you thinking about regulation aspects and how it might impact your industry? Or do you feel like no matter what happens, who wins, what the laws are, you're set up for success because of how diversified your product line is?
That's it. We're not concerned about who wins. Whatever comes at us, we're going to address the market, in a way that benefits us, that benefits our shareholders, and we're just going to continue to execute and continue to grow.
And then you also have critics that kind of continue to echo that the U.S. needs to develop domestic supply for batteries. How does Dragonfly fit into that picture? I know you kind of mentioned it with the domestic aspect of it, but any more color you want to add to that?
We absolutely have to develop our domestic supply, our domestic manufacturing, specifically of lithium-ion batteries. And look, you can think about it as a homeland security issue. We have to be less reliant on foreign sources and foreign manufacturers. But on the other hand, this is an incredible opportunity. We have lithium here. Here in the state of Nevada, we have lithium in the ground. Why wouldn't we take advantage of that, take that lithium and produce products and sell it, worldwide, and actually gain the revenue from that? It's a business decision.
Yeah. And then you also have a question in the chat here from Disk Drive. Let me know if this, makes sense to you, because I'm not too familiar with the space, but it's LFP versus Li for EVs. Any context there?
Yeah, so LFP is lithium iron phosphate. It's a cathode. It actually is a lithium ion battery. Li refers to traditional lithium ion batteries in EVs, which have a metal oxide, NMC, NCA cathode. And so the metal oxides are much more energy dense. You're always going to go farther on a charge, but they do contain other harder to get elements like nickel and especially cobalt. So the move to LFP is because of the availability of cobalt primarily, and of nickel. But LFP is a great short distance car. You're always going to go longer distances with the NCA and NMCs.
Yeah, and I knew what the LI was. The LFP, I've learned something new on that aspect of it. Is there, sometimes when it comes to companies, I feel like there's stories that might be misunderstood by the markets, right? There might be things that are missing in terms of the messaging that the company is trying to communicate to the investors and potential investors as well. Any message that you feel like folks may not be getting? Anything you want to tell our viewers about in terms of where you're headed? Anything I may have missed to bring up here today?
Sure. Honestly, we're in a crowded space. there's a lot of noise in the lithium ion space. It is hard for us to get our message out. And because we have been historically so well known through battle-borne batteries as a supplier to the RV industry, we actually, became a public company to deploy the cell manufacturing that we've developed. And that's been hard to do given how the markets have behaved over the last couple of years. Nevertheless, we continue to develop technologies, and we are going to be a very unique and innovative cell manufacturing company. And as we diversify these battery pack markets, for example, into heavy duty trucking and oil and gas, we're also expanding on the downstream side. So we are more than an RV supplier.
Yeah, and that that aspect of it is what's interesting, because I mentioned before, where it's like, hey, this technology can be used in the EV space, but there are also other different spaces for us here as well. Any other thoughts before we let you go here?
Junaid, thank you so much for including us in this, and it's always a pleasure.
You got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time here today. That is Dr. Denis Phares, who is the CEO of Dragonfly Energy Holdings. Ticker is DFLI. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and continue the conversation here, which definitely a link, I believe, here in a moment. But, this is kind of where you have different ways to go ahead and attack the market. I do see we have Erin in the back, so we'll bring her on here in just a moment. But this is what this conversation, this is what this show is about, is how can we go ahead and find ways to invest our hard-earned money in not just the popular stocks, such as your Teslas, your Rivians, your GMs, but also different ways to do that. Erin, I believe we are good for you. Just give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready, and we'll go ahead and bring you on. And of course, chat, we appreciate you guys asking questions there as well. So if you have anything you want me to ask, please go ahead and let us know, and we can go ahead and get them integrated as well. And if you have other tickers that you want us to take a look at towards the end of the show, we can do that as well. Erin, let me get a thumbs up whenever you're ready. We'll bring you on. All right. Here is Erin, who is the executive analyst at Cox Automotive. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
There's so many. I've got a fun question for you at the end, but it's based on, I'm not going to tell you what it's based on. I'll have a little bit of a good surprise. But before we kind of dive into this EV side of things, tell me a little bit about what is it that you do?
So I'm the executive analyst for Cox Automotive. I report directly into our chief economist, Jonathan Smoke. And our role within the company is to really not only help our internal stakeholders understand what is the automotive market doing right now, what's the larger macro trends that are really impacting the automotive industry. And then, of course, I help synthesize some of that information for our external stakeholders as well.
Let's kind of go broad, and then we'll kind of dive right in. What are your thoughts on the current EV market? It's kind of gone through some tough times, but how do you see the outlook for automakers and also maybe the other aspects of it as well?
I think we have to remember that this transition is going to take some time, but we're not seeing that the EV market is going down the tubes or anything to that effect. In fact, sales are actually growing at a faster pace than ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles. And we're up 7% in July, up 11.3% year over year. So we are seeing growth. We are seeing some brands like Tesla start to lose market share, but that's a good thing because that means there's a lot of good competition coming into the market, providing some good choice and optionality for people who are willing to experiment with the transition of powertrain.
And that's kind of always been a thing of Tesla, where it's like, hey, you're the leader right now, but will others go ahead and catch up to it as well? We're kind of seeing the conversation happening in the chip space with NVIDIA as well. You had Cox Automotive that issued a 2024 path to EV adoption study, where it was mentioned that electric vehicle consideration will surge in the second half of decade. Tell me a little bit more about this study.
So we looked at about 2,500 plus vehicle shoppers, market vehicle shoppers, as well as over 500 dealers, to really find out how are people thinking about the EV adoption at this point. We did a study back in 2021. And what we found is that a lot of people are moving towards consideration. We're seeing that a lot of people, as we label them skeptics, that say that they would become considerers within the next 3 to 5 years, and then potentially into the 5 to 10 year time frame. We're seeing that people are going to come around. But the challenge is, it's infrastructure. And especially for the skeptics, which I found interesting, is higher up on the list was lack of in-home charging. It just goes to show that we really need to remember not everybody has garages at their homes and the ability to charge overnight. And that could be as big of an impetus to have people to stay back in consideration as infrastructure challenges or as battery technology challenges. But the cars are there. They're good cars. It's a great alternative powertrain if that's what you're looking for these days. And so I think that we're going to continue to see adoption grow just at a more reasonable pace.
I made a joke with a conversation I had yesterday with Stephanie Link about how, I'm trying to fit the finance bro stigma of like have the Patagonia, which I don't, but maybe have like a Tesla, which I don't. But I looked at getting a Tesla. And one of the reasons I didn't get one is because where I live, the infrastructure doesn't allow for it, right? Like there's so it's not just like, to me, the houses or homes or garages, like you mentioned, but even apartments may not have the budgets to go ahead and include something like that. We're seeing it a little bit more when I travel, but like, it still isn't something that's accessible to folks. So I definitely agree with you on that point.
And it's a different type of driving too. I mean, I actually just popped out. I'm here at a beautiful drive event in Portland, Oregon, and I'm getting to drive a bunch of different EVs, plug-in hybrids today, and then ICE, combustion engines. And you have to remember, one pedal driving is a very different experience too. So the whole experience for a lot of people is something to become accustomed to really learn about, experiment with, see how they feel about it. But infrastructure is a challenge. If you don't know how you're going to reliably have that battery power, it's going to be difficult for people to really see clearly there.
I've used this example quite a bit with the viewers and other folks I've talked to in the EV space. I went to a wedding maybe 2 years ago in Houston. It was an hour away. I got in my gas car. My cousin got in her EV. I got home an hour before her because she had to stop, charge, and there was a line, right? And it's past midnight. So like, there's some concerns there as well. It's like, how accessible is it for folks to use EVs now that you've budgeted for it in the first place? Let's be honest, isn't cheap. Want to go back to a statement that was said in your May 14th press release, in which I believe it says something along the lines of, as technology improves, the U.S. charging network expands and prices moderate further, 54% of current skeptics will become EV considerers within 3 to 5 years. Any thoughts on that as we continue to grow within the next 10 years?
I think it's true. I think we will continue to bring people. I mean, as you see more vehicles on the road, more people are going to get used to seeing the type of powertrain, used to seeing more charging stations. They are coming through and online. So I think that, it's going to take time. Everyone got a little bit overzealous on how quickly the EV adoption was going to go. Maybe not giving it enough credence on how big of a transition it really is, especially for consumers. That's a massive change in thinking and behavior. But it will continue to come. And I do believe that we will get some of those skeptics on board as soon as they can feel some comfort level.
Now, let me ask you this. I know you're at a pretty cool event right now. Jealous, by the way. Who are your favorite automakers when it comes to the US? And I'd love to get your insights globally as well.
Yeah, so I have to admit I'm a little bit biased because I did spend 10 years with the great brand Four Rings Audi, and I get to drive their RS6 Avant Performance today, which is my favorite car on earth. So I will say the Audis are still pretty top of the line for me as far as just brand loyalty and loving a brand. But the other, I also used to have a Toyota 4Runner. It's still one of my favorite cars ever. And Toyota, the brand, I think they've been very smart about how they've been planning their their transition in the powertrains by making highly efficient engines for a very long time, continuing to be very open and exploratory of a lot of different alternative fuel types. So they're another brand that I just really like. They stay true to who their customers are. They build really quality, great cars. So always a big fan of them. We do have a McLaren here and an Aston Martin here today. So I'm not going to lie, being an F1 fan, I'm always like happy to see some of those big luxury cars. Volvo is another great car that's out there these days. So it's kind of hard when you're an auto geek. It's kind of hard to pick one favorite, but that Audi RS6 Avant, I'm not going to lie, it's my favorite.
You kind of gave it away. The fun question, I've got a couple more for you, but the fun question at the end that I was going to bring up was, I love your out of office message, by the way. And then you mentioned, the Audi RS6 is like something you're really looking forward to driving as well. So I think it's cool that you kind of get to test out these different things and be like, hey, on paper, this is great, but actually driving it physically, because that's the one thing people mention is that, hey, when you drive a Tesla, it just has a different feel.
It's very different
than just a regular vehicle in itself. Now, what are your thoughts on not just Tesla, but the, full self-driving aspect to it as well? Any general thoughts? And we can dive in a little bit deeper there.
Yeah, so I could be a little controversial here, but I take 10 years ago, we all talked about autonomous driving. It was going to be the new thing. And I would argue that a lot of the cars these days have the technology. Like, I like to joke, someone just hasn't flipped a switch in your car, but you likely could have a lot of autonomous features on that car. It's just simply not safe yet to drive that way. We don't have, talk about infrastructure. My personal belief, if we have a tough enough time trying to figure out how to get charging stations, to me at least, autonomous driving feels like you've got to have darn near 100% adoption. Otherwise you're having humans fight with robots. It's just, I think it's great in the geofenced areas where it's becoming a reality. I think it's a wonderful thing to consider for public transportation, solving some of the challenges that we have in some of our more urban areas where we could geofence and create situations where not only electric cars, but also autonomous cars could help with loosening up our public transportation challenges that we have. But I don't see a future in the next 5 to 10 years, at least, where robotaxis and autonomy is taking over our roadways. I just don't see the safety in it or the infrastructure and government regulations catching up that quickly.
And I don't have the numbers, but let's just say for easy math, this is my opinion, where say if, unfortunately, we have 100 deaths per year based on cars. I know it's a lot more. I'm just doing it for easy math. Say we have full self-driving that is adopted to a good rate, and say the percentage drops or the number drops to say 60, right? That's a nice drop, 40%. But then as soon as a 61st death, unfortunately, happens because of it, those are the headlines. That's where the government comes in with possible regulations and things like that. And that's where we kind of, I think, are going to face some challenges where people won't really look at the numbers and say, hey, yes, this is unfortunate. Loss of life always is. But when you zoom out, you take a look at the big picture, we're headed in the right direction.
And I think we should take some, cues from what's going on in the electric transition. I think everyone agrees that electrified engines are helping with reducing our carbon emissions and things like this. And still, yet, it's a huge behavioral change that we're asking a lot of consumers to make that leap. And so, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, it's like maybe we see how far we can get with behavior change behind electrification before we go. We might just be over stimulating, let's say, a consumer's brain around all the different things they need to be thinking about. And, we've even heard, we were just listening to a bunch of the female journalists that I'm here with yesterday talking about like Gen Z and how, it's almost like they're going back to vintage, like they like the haptics of the buttons and, not everyone wants everything into the screen and, I want the roll down window because it's like a classic car, and so I think we sometimes need to remember that innovation is really great. And if it's there for safety reasons, that's great. But, regulating that, makes cars more expensive. It makes the technology more expensive. It makes repairs more expensive. And so there's a lot to consider on how fast we push some of that kind of technology in the industry.
And sometimes technology, to me, as great as it is, sometimes it can also make you a little bit more too dependent. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I live by my calendar. It doesn't matter if it's a friend's birthday, this show, date night, whatever it is. If it's not on my calendar, I think I have nothing to do. But that self-reliance on that also can be like, wait, I can't just remember for myself.
Right. Think about GPSs, like how many people don't know how to get anywhere. I'm a Luddite for sure. So I will admit, I still get a newspaper delivered to my driveway.
Really? Do you read it? Or is it just for like
every day?
Habit?
No. Nope. From front to back, I read it, the Wall Street Journal, and I do the crossword puzzle in pen. Okay. So I will look at maps and I will remember my directions and then I will go because, the more you rely on that, you are starting to slow down your awareness of what's going on around you. And I do think that, it's not that technology can't help us, but sometimes we need to remember what place it has in what we're doing. And again, I think the innovations are great. I think Tesla will solve how to leverage generative AI in the solution for autonomous driving. I think it's great if they're able to implement some of that innovation in areas where it could help us where we need it. But I think broad adoption is going to take some time.
The GPS example is so funny because I live in Atlanta and, I've been here for, 10 years. Went to high school here, moved out for a bit for college, came back. But like there's this place called Little Bangkok that I love to get Thai food from. I've gone there 100 times, but I still need my GPS. It's a 12-minute drive, right? Even when I lived in Brookhaven, I'm like, hey, listen, those turns can be tricky. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But the self-reliance on technology is great. This has been a fun conversation. Before I let you go though, any other thoughts that you were hoping to talk about when it comes to this sector?
No, I mean, I think we have an exciting automotive market on our hands. I think it's going to continue to improve. We do know that the market's performing under, potential right now. We've got some things in the hopper here with the election happening and some uncertainty, but we believe that interest rate cuts are coming, and I think it's a good place to be. It's an exciting place to be, and I do think electrification is going to continue, and the better for it because the market's really responding with some good innovations and some good new technologies that might help us get over that hump of going straight from combustion engines to electrified, fully electrified engines. And I think it's exciting to see how all of these traditional OEMs or automakers, as well as new form automakers coming to market with some really cool innovation.
Yeah. Well, hey, best of luck to you. I know you're out there with some pretty cool female executives. Have fun, stay safe, and enjoy your drive with the Audi there. Yeah. My producer's very excited. He's slacking me about how the RS6 is an absolute beast. So I'm sure you'll have a blast.
Oh gosh, I remember driving it on the Autobahn in Germany, and let me tell you, there's nothing like it. If you ever get over there, that is the car you have to try to get it in manual too. So.
Well, hey, first I got to learn how to drive manual. I'll work on that.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, I'm in Atlanta. I've got a manual. Come over. I'll teach you. Come on.
My people will hit up your people. I'll talk to you later, Erin.
Great to talk to you. Take care.
You got it. That is Erin, who is the executive analyst at Cox Automotive. Thank you for her time, by the way. She's out of office doing these really cool things with some female executives and also driving some pretty cool cars. I appreciate her time here today. We're going to continue the conversation. I've had a pleasure of talking to Dan before, who's the president and CEO of Ideal Power. Ticker on the NASDAQ is IPWR. Dan, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We've been having such great conversations around EV and the different angles of it. And I always love to talk to different people that are doing different things, such as what your company's doing, but also because you can look at a 6, where to me it's a 6, but from where you're standing, it's a 9. It's always great to kind of get the different perspective of it. But before I get all your different angles of things, give us a quick, brief overview of what is it that your company does.
Sure. Ideal Power works on power semiconductor devices, and power semiconductors are used to control the flow of energy, change its voltage, change it to whatever form you need it. They're used, a lot in things like electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, but they're also used in things that you use every day. Things like your refrigerator, air conditioning, if you have solar for your home or business. Power semiconductors are what take that raw energy and convert it into the form that's needed for the application.
Now, weeks ago, you had collaborated with a third global automaker to explore the integration of its, I believe it was the B-trans semiconductor power switch into EVs. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, it is, as you mentioned, it's our third global automaker. The automakers are really struggling to figure out how do they solve some of the problems, because the EVs are a new platform for all of them. So they need to do things like bring the cost down. They need to improve the range of the electric vehicles so they get more miles out of the batteries. And they need to actually be able to charge them faster. And semiconductors play a big role in all three of those things. This new automaker that we're working with, they're interested in using our technology as part of an EV contactor. And what the contactor does, it provides a safety feature in the event that there is an upset conditions with the battery. It protects the battery and it protects the car itself. And they want to use semiconductors because they can act orders of magnitude faster than the traditional electromechanical contactors that have been used in vehicles for decades.
On the semiconductor side of things, are you having any trouble? Maybe this is old news. I'm not familiar with it, but are you still having any issues in terms of like supply, or is it readily available to how much you need that the demand is being met?
Yeah, the semiconductor supply issues were really on things like processing units. For power semiconductor devices, we haven't had any issues. We use traditional silicon wafers. We use very mature processing facilities to make our device. Our technology itself is new, and how we make the devices is new. But that was really more related to processors that were driving the shortage, and unfortunately impacted the industry pretty broadly.
Now, I know you've had, we talked about the B-Train power module. You have also collaborated before with another major OEM as well. What B-Train is the industry disruptor solution that you think will benefit automakers, and why?
Our technology, B-Train, is really being used in the drivetrain of the electric vehicles. So it could be in the power inverter that's used to take the energy from the batteries and convert it to a form that the electric motor can use. Yeah. It's also being used for circuit protection, things like contactors, because we can really impact all three of those big issues. We can impact the cost relative to more expensive materials like silicon carbide. We can extend the range because our technology improves the efficiency of how that conversion process works. And with some of the changes that are being made in electric vehicles, we can also help them charge more quickly, which is also a big concern for people.
Charging quick. I mean, I mention this all the time. I just mentioned the example before about how it takes people way too long to charge the vehicle, but also to maybe get their place in line to charge the vehicle as well, right? So I think the infrastructure side of things, there's still so much to grow. Like the place where I live, I've got two, condo buildings next to me, 0 charging stations. It's a pretty nice place, but like still nothing. There's no infrastructure there for people to be able to easily charge when they're at home, and then, garages and people who have single family homes or family houses, they may not have the budget or the infrastructure to easily be able to install that there as well. So it does get a little bit tough. You have another product. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's called Semcool. Hopefully I got that right. But tell me a little bit more about this.
Well, if you think about all the renewable energy that's going in, whether it's solar in businesses, wind, if you think about all the charging stations that need to go in, all the energy storage facilities people are putting in to manage their electricity costs, our grid was not designed to accommodate all that. It was designed as a central power plant with a hub and spoke model. So now we're getting all these distributed resources and distributed loads in a system that wasn't designed for it, which means they need circuit protection. They need to be able to isolate from the system if there's a problem. If there's a fault somewhere on the system, you want to protect the equipment so it doesn't get damaged. And that drives the need for solid state circuit breakers, things that can act very fast, but don't create a lot of losses. And that's what our technology really enables. We are really the first power semiconductor device whose conduction losses are so low that you can actually make sense by using a solid state circuit breaker versus an electromechanical device. End up with something that can act literally orders of magnitude faster than the traditional electromechanical breakers, and have something that's highly controllable, which what you really need is we're getting to a more and more intelligent electricity system.
Yeah. Circuit breakers might still give some folks in the chat, including myself, a little bit of a nightmare, fear from the 2020 days, depending on how you were positioned in the stock market. But, even they're important. Stock market joke aside, I have an adjustable base, and my friends who have adjustable bases, she literally got one delivered yesterday. And the number one thing I told her was get a surge protector, because you never want something like Mother Nature, lightning, outage in the building, whatever the case may be, to damage your precious investment. In this case, for her, it was an adjustable base, right? So these things are put in place to be like, all right, minimum damage, control things as an insurance policy so we can regroup and figure out what we need to fix and what we need to do on that side.
And when you think about that at an industrial level, when you've got, lightning striking somewhere on the grid, everything that is connected to that can see an enormous surge that can damage large industrial motors, all kinds of equipment. Think about data centers. I mean, they have a lot of circuit protection because you have to be able to act really quickly if you want to safeguard whatever's connected to that grid.
Yeah, I did a show maybe about 4 years ago in Dallas where we had a brownout. I've heard of a blackout. I never knew what a brownout was, but it was go back to the grid where there was just too much happening. I think the heat in Dallas was too much, whatever the case may have been. And, we just didn't have power for 90% of the building. So we had to adjust. So like those things do happen and you just have to kind of be prepared for it. We talked a lot about like the positives in this space, in the EV space on this side of things. What are some challenges that you think, not just maybe your company, but just in general, the industry is going to face? And how do you think your company is well set up to deal with those challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that the industry has is the cost of the vehicles. During COVID, the cost of all types of automobiles increased because of the supply issues. That hasn't really reset yet. That process is starting to happen, but all vehicles are more expensive than they were a few years ago. And electric vehicles in particular are pretty high cost. And that's a barrier to a lot of people because, a lot of the vehicles that are out there, Tesla Model S's and others are not really what the mainstream can afford to buy. So the cost has to come down significantly. And our technology really helps with that because we don't have to use these exotic materials that we see in a lot of electric vehicles. We can actually perform that functionality to control the flow of energy a lot more cost effectively. The other issues are all around charging. It's going to take years for that infrastructure to get built out. You want to get as many miles out of the batteries that you've got. and you want to be able to charge as quickly as possible. And
Yeah.
the semiconductors that are used play a big role in improving those things while that infrastructure gets built.
What are your thoughts on, speaking of challenges, I think the biggest one, maybe not in today's future, but maybe in 5-10 years that we're going to start to face is self-driving mode as well, right? I'm asking all my guests this. So what are your thoughts on that? Because, well, let me get your thoughts and I'll give you mine.
Well, I think to some degree, it's been a little overpromised in terms of what the capability really is there. And unfortunately, I think a lot of consumers have really assumed that there's a lot more capability than there is. I think to a large degree, until there's an infrastructure that supports it, whether that's embedded sensors in the road or whether you've got an artificial intelligence system that's got millions and millions of driving hours that it can draw from, it is going to be limited in what it can do. I think it will continue to improve, but I don't think it's going to be what people think of as truly autonomous driving for a lot of years.
Yeah. And I think, I mentioned this with Erin just before you hopped on, where say, I don't have the exact number of how many Americans die a year from automotive accidents, but say if that number is 1,000, just throwing a number out there for easy math. But say if self-driving gets it down to say 600, that's a great decrease, right? 40% or so. But then as soon as a 601 happens, as soon as we get to maybe 50 deaths that are because of the self-driving, now you've got calls for regulation, more regulation, because I'm sure there will be some. But like, that's also the dangerous aspect where it's like, then you have the unfortunate conversation, now being maybe philosophical a little bit, but like, hey, the person that passed away because of full self-driving may not have passed away if this wasn't a thing. So even though the numbers decreased, you've changed the game a little bit. And it's a tough conversation to have when you're talking about the loss of life, no matter who it is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why, I think bringing these systems and their capability out and accumulating just thousands and thousands of hours to really test where the limits are and what they can and can't do are going to be really important in people's acceptance of it. And if you really want to avoid there being a perception that it's not ready, because that will really drive people away from adopting it when it is going to continue to mature. But like I say, it's going to take a while.
I've got a question in the chat from Don. By the way, SemCool is a great brand name. What are some names of the companies likely to adopt your new SSCB tech? Now, I will go ahead and say this. You're a publicly traded company. Some things you may or may not be able to answer. So I want to give you that pretext. But are you able to provide any insights here today on this from our viewer at all?
Well, unfortunately, the companies we're working with, we're working under an NDA. So they haven't shared with us what they're thinking about calling any of their solid state circuit breaker products. Everybody looks to how they differentiate it, and hopefully our name will start to show up in some fashion, whether it's like empowered by SimCool or some other way that gives us a direct nod, because it'll just help stimulate others to do the same thing.
Before I let you go, Dan, any other thoughts, any other point of views that you wanted our viewers to know about before I let you go?
Yeah, keep an eye on our website, because we announce the things that we're doing commercially. We're starting to get to the point where we can start to name some companies, like we named Stellantis. They actually named us first. We were one of their venture finalists. Nice. And as we get further with some of these companies, we hope to name them because people are going to recognize the names of companies that we're working with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time here today, Dan. I look forward to more of these conversations as you achieve these partnerships and milestones.
All right. Thanks. It was great to be here.
You got it. That is my man, Dan, who's a president and CEO of Ideal Power. Ticker on the NASDAQ is IPWR. And we'll go ahead and continue the great conversation here with Justus Parmar, who is the CEO of Fortuna Investments. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm, glad we're having this conversation, because I've been telling the viewers like this, there's so many different angles and ways to take a look at this, and so many different perspectives based on experiences and data that each individual that's talking to us can kind of speak on their opinion about. But before we kind of dive into all of that, give me a quick overview of what is it that you do?
So I run a venture capital firm. We've got offices in Canada, Miami Beach, and Los Angeles. I'm here in LA right now on the West Coast. We made a name for ourselves back in 2016, 2017. That's when Elon Musk and Tesla were first starting to take off. I only say that because he wasn't necessarily the rock star then that he is now. And just for people that, for context, I mean, Tesla was it was a dog of a stock. It was the number one shorted stock on the planet. He was selling 20,000 cars a quarter. Everybody, a lot of people thought it was going to zero. We didn't. And our thesis isn't to buy large cap stocks. We didn't buy Tesla. But what we realized was if this and other things take off, i.e. Apple computers, and there's a real demand on these lithium ion batteries. And so we started investing and building lithium and battery companies, which worked out exceptionally well. Several went to a few $100 million, a couple went to a couple $2 billion. And that's kind of opened up our kind of foray. Now we're big investors in the new space economy for the last couple of years. We're building some very exciting companies there. So there's a lot of overlap and synergy with today's programming, Zaid.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to set the stage in. So you've had experience, you know what you're talking about, and you've proven it with the money that's hitting your direct deposit in a bank account. You, I believe you were a strategic investor and founding shareholder of Millennial Lithium, which was acquired by Lithium Americas for about $500 million. I think it was $460 million in 2021. With that context, with that expertise that you have, what are your thoughts on lithium today in 2024?
So ironically, we were out of the market for the last couple of years. Lithium, Millennial and American Lithium, a company that trades on NASDAQ, were kind of our last big shareholdings in the industry. Our timing was actually probably pretty good in the sense that the lithium spot price is obviously cratered. There's been a recession. I call it a recession in spite of whatever the media things call it, but there's been a huge slowdown in pretty much every industry and sector, especially VC. And so we've pivoted away from batteries and lithium. But ironically, we're starting to take a look at the lithium industry again, just only because it's so out of favor. And we've got tons of bench strength. There's 30 some odd people or folks at our firm who are very, very smart individuals. And so we're seeing, we're looking at this as an opportunity because things are so out of favor, and it probably won't last like this forever. So we're trying to kind of cherry pick and trying to understand. That said, in the industry, a lot of the companies have raised capital 18, 24 months ago, and they've heavily depleted their cash positions. So these companies are looking to go back to market to raise money, but I think the market's so tight right now, they're having a hard time doing so. So we're kind of walking on eggshells a little bit, trying to be strategic because we don't want to put ourselves in harm's way or put our neck through the guillotine, so to speak. But I think there's an opportunity there. And then beyond that, aside from the actual lithium carbonate and lithium and the mining operations, we do find solid state batteries to be extremely interesting at this current point in time.
What about in terms of, say, AI and robotics? What are your thoughts on that side of things that are going to use some of these technologies, some of these batteries to kind of power those future technology advances? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's been distilled through, we're still so early. We're in 1 or 2 of this AI revolution, so it hasn't fully been distilled through. But I mean, just from a logical or just if you think about it type of thing where AI is going to run these models quicker, faster, better than any human or computer system is going to be able to do. So just enhancing those probabilities and networks and connectivity, it's going to make some super batteries, some super computers, some tremendous efficiency. So absolutely, if there's companies that are working on good technologies to advance battery storage, that's absolutely a home run. That's a slam dunk if they can pull off the technology.
Now, if you're okay with it, I'd love to kind of go maybe rapid fire, if you will, on some publicly traded companies in the EV sector and just get your thoughts on it, generic or in depth. It's up to you. Let's start with the biggest one, Tesla. You started the show talking about that. Give me your thoughts on Tesla in terms of where you think it's going to head up from here.
Sure. So Tesla, I mean, look, I think the stock price is in around $200, give or take, 10, $15. Let's say $200 a share. If you take a look at the stock, it's actually cheaper to buy now than in around this time last year. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's down 20%-ish in the last year. We are VC people, but we're also value people. You can buy something, but if you're not buying it at the right price, you're going to lose money. So people sometimes forget that. And so what I'm getting at is you have a world-class CEO, you've got a world-class setup, you've got a company that's kind of a monopoly. They've taken all the market share. They're a cash juggernaut, and you can buy them 20% cheaper than you could last year. there's a very compelling setup there. And so, and I'm going to talk about day trading. I have no idea if it's going up, down, or sideways in the next week.
Tell me where it's going in the next 10 minutes. After this show, where is it going?
But that's the way a lot of these folks think and talk and write. And so I don't know. And I would encourage and implore a lot of folks to think a little bit longer term. It's hard enough to get things right as is.
Yeah.
You need to give yourself a little bit of time, right? And if you're just, betting on some calls in the next 10, 30 days or something, who knows? You may as well go to the casino. That's not what we do. That's not what we understand. The fundamentals of those companies are extremely strong. It's cheap. And again, that's discounted with you haven't accounted for anything to do with the FSD and the self-driving car aspect of it. There's going to be, I think by the end of the year, a few million self-driving cars. And then again, his Optimus, his robotics platform, which has there's zero representation in the market cap of that company. And so, look, if you like Elon, if you believe in any of those things, that's the way to play it. Absolutely.
And I'm breaking my own rules with this not being rapid fire anymore. But with Elon, do you feel like, I'm just curious as your perspective, because you're obviously successful. You've had a lot of great exits. Do you feel like the focus being divided with X, robotics, Tesla, AI hinders the growth potential of Tesla? Or do you feel like he has built a great infrastructure to where he's able to take on these other projects?
I guess in a perfect world, you'd want him only to focus on one thing. And, theoretically through your principle, it would be more outstanding than it's not. But I would look at the net result of everything he's been able to do. And I can only think of maybe one person in the entire world that could manage 5 super companies. He's doing a tremendous job. He's growing tremendous shareholder value. If you talk to a Jeff Bezos of the, he's saying, hey, listen, he's left Amazon in Seattle. He's moved, close to my house in Miami Beach. And so when you listen to him talk, he's like, hey, listen, I can't do 3 things at once. I can't even do 2 things at once. I can only do one thing really, really good. And I've got a pretty good track record of doing that. And I think that's reflective of most CEOs. I would encourage every CEO only to do one thing. Don't make it your side hustle. Don't do this all in. So that principle is very, very, very sound. But I think there are exceptions to certain rules. And so, the proof's in the pudding. He's got I don't even say a hot hand, because he's weathered markets. And then I guess, Sinead, to your earlier point, I think the companies he's strategically picked, they're all extremely complementary to each other.
They are.
And so, there's the adage, right? We're all playing checkers while he's playing chess, right? And so, it's really interesting to watch firsthand. And again, we're in the space industry. We're big SpaceX shareholders. I can talk a long time about the nuances of what he's doing in SpaceX, and it's very outstanding stuff. Yeah.
The only other CEO I can think of is Jack Dorsey, where it was Twitter, and then I think it was Square at the time, or Block now I think it's called. So that's one where, and I don't know how well Square is doing anymore. I don't know how great it was doing when he left, but that's just another CEO that I can think of that's done it. Then in terms of multitasking, the NFL kicks off tonight. I don't know how much multitasking I personally will be able to do with work and all those things. Let me just get your thoughts on a couple of other ones. Rivian, Rivian was so hot out the gate, right? You had, I think it was Ford that was invested in them. You had, I believe it was Amazon that has a backstop with their orders in them as well, if I'm remembering correctly. What are your thoughts on Rivian?
Yeah, so Rivian, look, I mean, you have the Rivians and I guess called the Lucids. There's kind of 3 players, I guess I would articulate in there. I mean, there's probably a couple more peripheral ones, but the Rivian, these companies are challenging in this aspect that they're making the cost of these cars for them to produce is $200,000 to $300,000. They're trying to sell them for $100,000, $120,000, $95,000. They're bleeding cash, hundreds of millions. I think the Rivian, they lost $1 billion last year.
Yeah.
Fact check that number. I think they lost $1 billion. I think they have $7 billion on their balance sheet. Volkswagen put an investment in there. So they actually, they have, and I might be mixing the two up, Rivian or Lucid, but the one company has a long runway. There's $1 billion of cash. There's there's $7 billion of cash on their balance sheet. They burn $1 billion a year. Yeah. So they actually have a runway. I'd be more, I guess, intrigued in actually taking a look at that particular one. If I don't know, Sinead, if you can pull it up, is that? I just
googled it. So here's this is according to, and we're doing this live, folks. This is according to autonews.com, and it says the question is, what is the net loss of Rivian in 2023? And the answer, according to autonews.com, is it reported a net loss of $5.4 billion in 2023 calendar year. Rivian says that it loses $32,705 per vehicle that was delivered in the second quarter compared to about $32,600. So they lose $100 more than they did the same time, say, in 2022. So to answer your question, it goes back to what you were saying. Yeah, they're losing about $33,000 per vehicle that was sold in the second quarter in 2023.
Plus all the R&D costs, plus the G&A, plus, I mean, all that's, it's not, and that's what I'm getting at, the fundamental. So
Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank would not be happy with this type of investment.
He unequivocally would not be. But his son, I actually know Kevin, he's Canadian, and so his son Trevor actually works for Tesla, by the way. But
yeah, that's right.
No, so what I'm getting at is, so that they have to make it at least cash flow break even. They can't, at some point in time, they got to turn the corner. They have to make it a profitable endeavor. I believe Volkswagen put $5 billion into that company, or Rivian. So they actually have, in spite of losing $1 billion a year, they've got a reasonably long runway to call it figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm not, and again, I don't know if they can or will figure it out. I don't necessarily have an opinion, but it's not really easy what they're trying to do. Obviously, the company we talked about earlier, Tesla, was able to figure it out. They're the first company in 70 years, American car company, that's been able to, to become profitable.
Yeah.
And so it's not like an easy thing, like building a skyscraper or like, some sort of like very easy thing. They're doing very, very difficult things. So that said, if they can figure it out, there's enough room in the marketplace for another player. They have the validation of Volkswagen. They've got some really good things going on there. They do have a bit of a runway. I just think it's a tough sled. And if you're going to pick Rivian or Tesla, I think it's a no-brainer which one of the two to pick.
You also had Ford that had, I believe, a recall recently because of their engine. So like, there's also those things where you think you got it right, but I mean, like we've seen with CrowdStrike, where it wasn't a hack, it was a bug, it was a glitch, whatever you want to call it, that can go ahead and hinder growth as well, especially since we're talking about EVs in this form of, say, full self-driving vehicles, right? That's a whole different caveat of like, this is technology. No matter how perfect your coding can be, things can go wrong. I think this was a rumor. I don't think this was legit, where a software in the broker space, in the stockbroker space, had some troubles because they didn't take into account that it was a leap year. So they didn't take into account that there was like an extra day, and therefore it threw off all the coding like a domino effect. So it's like these little things that can really mess that up. What are your thoughts, before I let you go and get your final thoughts on full self-driving? Do you think we're 10 years away? Do you think it'll never really happen? Do you think regulation? Like, what are your thoughts? And yeah, let me get that.
Yeah, FSD. I mean, well, it is happening. I mean, I took a Uber in Miami a month or two ago, and yeah, I mean, the Uber guy, had the self-driving mechanism. Obviously, he was sitting in the car, but it's there. It's on.
Did
the
you
street.
feel comfortable? Let me get the human element. Did you feel comfortable? Or were you a little nervous, like, my man, put the hand on the vehicle?
But I had my wife beside me, so I didn't really. So I put the brave face on and say, "Let's go." But no, I think there's a little bit of, certainly for me, there's a bit of apprehension. But after 5-10 minutes, and we're on the highway and things, and this guy's going 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you can actually put on this particular one, you don't actually have to go the speed limit. So you can actually go slightly ahead it, and the car's weaving in and out of traffic at 70 miles an hour. It's pretty cool, really cool. And so, they've to be able to do that, they've pretty much figured it out. They're probably 90% of the way there. I obviously they've got to work out some glitches, some bugs. There might be the odd, screw up or accident and things that's going to happen just with the sheer velocity or number of cars on the road, but they're 90% of the way there. Right. And so I think there's going to be different states that have different maybe perspectives on how this is all going to kind of shake out. But I guess the bumper sticker or the message is we're there. Like, it's happening. He's deploying them. He's got the data. He's got all the intelligence. He's a master operator, and the implementation will be there. And it's gonna change the face of that company.
I have enough anxiety trying to parallel park, which, spoiler alert, I can't. To let. Yeah, I don't know. That just.
I think this car will be able to help you out then. You can drink your Starbucks.
Dude, I saw a video while doing research on like FSD stuff. I saw a YouTube video of like, I think it's called summoning or whatever, where like your car comes from the parking lot and goes. And there were just babies, there were kids, there were adults in this video. And I'm like, dude, I am getting anxiety just watching this, because one little, I don't know, it's incredible. But let me ask you a lifestyle tip for our viewers, if I may. You mentioned that, hey, a lot of, day trading versus long-term investing. What advice do you have to people? Because we live in this world where it's instant gratification. It's where it's more of like, hey, I put money in today, I want it to come out profitable tomorrow. What advice do you have to folks that are watching to get more long-term thinking?
And I think that's just the issue, right? I mean, we live in a day where everything's instant gratification. I mean, I'm 41 years old. Before, people would listen to the entire songs, and now the kids, I call them kids, they don't even listen to the song. They just want to hear the hook on TikTok and things, right? So it's becoming more and more condensed. It's like, hit me with the juice, hit me with the juice. And then again, I mean, I do this for a living. I'm a professional investor. I take it very seriously. It's my livelihood. Yeah. So I'm not, this is not a game to me per se. I mean, there's game like elements of it, but I take it very seriously. And so when you distill that and you think about that, and you read, all the most successful, intelligent investors out there, I mean, they're all saying the same things. And again, as I kind of mentioned earlier, where it's hard enough to get one thing right. Warren Buffett tries to get one idea a year right. One idea. I know he's got tremendous capital, big rack and all that sort of stuff, but the thesis is still the same. I want to find one really good idea and sit on it. And I get that people are limited with capital and they can't necessarily do that. But it's the same way that, look, if I would rather eat a bag of chips right now, but I just don't, because I know I'm going to start gaining weight if I start eating chips than pop. Right. It's going to give me the instant gratification. So you have to have that discipline, that stoic, like the stoic type of discipline where, you have to resist your temptation and you have to think about what's going to be the best over the long term and really stick to it. And it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it and making tons of money.
Yeah.
Fortunately. Yeah.
I appreciate the insight. And you're Canadian when you call it pop. By the way.
So is it soda? Is it soda down here?
It's soda. It's soda down here. I would love for you to go to a restaurant and call it pop and just record the reaction for me. But this was a great conversation. I appreciate your insights from the private sector to the public side, and also how folks can think more long term. I do appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
I had a fantastic time. Looking to do it again sometime. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. You got it. Take care. That is Justus Parmar, who is the CEO at Fortuna Investments. Great success. I mean, finding a gem like Tesla and lithium ion batteries back, when it was kind of not even really mentioned as it is mainstream now, is a great way to kind of build wealth. And he's been successful time and time again. So great insights there. And I will say the long-term investment thing, that's 100% something I need to focus on, is where you just invest it, don't look at it, and just, if you believe in the thesis, you go ahead and have risk management and it'll pay off. We're going to continue the conversation that I had with Stephanie Link yesterday, and she had some great insights, again, on not just how to play the Teslas and the Rivians, but also how to maybe play the grid in a country like India, where she has some investments through an ETF. Check out this conversation. Mind. Always some great insights with Stephanie Link, who is the Chief Investment Strategist and Head of Investment Solutions at Hightower Advisors. Stephanie, welcome back.
Hi, today. It's great to be here.
I really appreciate your time. I know you've been traveling quite a bit, so I really do appreciate you being here. Yeah. We've talked about a few things in the past, you and I have, right? We've talked about cybersecurity aspects of it. We've talked about AI. And I feel like when now we talk about EV and automotive, those things also kind of come into play with some of these names. But give me your overall outlook on how the EV sector has done, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely been an amazing growth story. Global electric car sales are up 35% year over year. There are 14 million EVs globally in 2023 for a total of 40 million. And EVs are now about 18% of total cars that are sold, up from about 14% just 2 years ago. So it's growing, but it's still small and it still has a ways to go. And I think you do need to have the proper infrastructure to get it to the next level. And in addition, at the same time, you have so much competition. I mean, they're going to have 25 new models in all electric models in 2024. The problem is only 5 of them are below $50,000 and none of them are below $30,000. So it's competitive. It's not priced exactly right just yet. There's infrastructure issues, but the growth is there. So I think you have to have a long time horizon if you're going to invest in this theme.
And then, well, if you're going to invest in this theme, though, are there particular names that you like? Not maybe that you're invested in, but like you've got Tesla that everyone loved. And now, obviously, that hasn't done well year to date compared to other tickers. You have Rivian that I think was above $100. And now I think it's maybe around 10 or so. So like any names that you're like, hey, they may be set up for success in the long term as you're looking at it.
Well, I think in the short term to medium term, I think it's still the hybrids that win. And I think that's what you're seeing. I mean, just talk to Toyota and the sales growth that they have seen this year, last year, well in excess of double digits in terms of sales. So that's an interesting name. The other way I'm kind of viewing it is, as I mentioned, infrastructure is such a big, important part of it. And we have to upgrade the grid. You need power to upgrade the grid and all these data centers. And everyone's talking about the data centers and the hyperscalers. But in fact, we do need the grid to be more modernized. And we haven't spent a lot of money on it in incremental new money. We've been spending on maintenance, but not new. And I think that's the way I view it, as the opportunity for something like a Quanta Services or an Eaton or a GE Vernova. So I'm playing on the infrastructure side, and then also on the hybrid side, certainly there is more interest in my mind.
It seems like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you're like casting your net wide. And the reason I mention that is because the last time we talked, we mentioned data centers for AI, for cybersecurity. Now, coming into the grid for EV space as well. So it seems like no matter what leads the way to data centers growing, whether it's EV, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's AI, you're casting your net wide enough to where the data centers, no matter what, is what's going to need to be played out here.
And I think we're in like the first inning, Sinead. Really, I think you have to have patience, especially the names I just mentioned, because I'm telling you, they're on any given day, they're going to be up a couple of percent and down a couple of percent. But the theme is there. We're going to spend $4 trillion between now and 2050 on kind of this electrification, this whole new energy transition, no matter who's in office, by the way. It's not going to matter, So that's why it's such a big theme for me. And that's why, I'd like to play it, because these companies that I just mentioned, they have a lot of diversified customers. So it's not just one kind of industry that they're exposed to.
Yeah. Now I know you've got, a equity portfolio with the Investment Solutions Group, which is like 3.5 billion in assets under management that you control as well. I want to take that and then bring it to India. This is the first time when you and I talked, you mentioned that you had exposure to that aspect of the world. And do they have any exposure to the grid there?
Yeah, well, so I own the ETF INDU, and the reason is because it is a very concentrated portfolio of only about 25 names. And the biggest name, 8% weighting, is Reliance Industries. And that company, that's all they do in terms of infrastructure build out, power management, even telecom, building out telecom there. And so I actually think that that's one of my favorite themes for this year. And I think it's going to be a long-term holding for me because of the demographics, because of the fiscal and monetary policies that we're seeing being put in place. And oh, by the way, we're seeing a lot of companies leaving China and building manufacturing plants in India. I think last time we talked, we talked about IBM shutting down 1,000 jobs in China, but just redeploying them into India. And you're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah. And then, you also had Apple possibly looking to build some things there. You had Elon. I don't know if he went to visit or not, but I know he has some cushy relationship there with the lead of India there in terms of governments as well. I want to come back to the US and talk about, so I bought a car maybe like say 2 years ago, right? And I looked at EV because it fits the finance bro, mantra, if you will, but it's tough to get charging stations, right? Like I went to a wedding and then on the way back, it was an hour drive, but it took my cousins 2 hours because they had to wait an hour to charge their vehicle because there was a line. So like the infrastructure, like you mentioned in terms of grids, I feel like the infrastructure isn't built in the US to handle all these EVs that are being sold as well. Are there any plays there in terms of like charging stations, or the grid is kind of how you're focused right now?
Well, I'm only focused on the grid because it's like the foundation. You can't do anything unless you have the grid and you're building it out and it's updated. And it's not even close to being updated. And so that's why I think there's more juice there. And I like these management teams very much. They're very forward thinking. And they have such a great strategy, and their backlogs are huge. And I mean, these are kind of numbers like I haven't seen Eaton putting up like a 13% backlog just in their electrification piece, not to mention aviation. That's another story and another conversation we can have for another day. But I just think that the numbers that I'm seeing from these really established companies, is just beginning, and even these management teams are surprised at how much is needed to build these to build out data centers, to build it all out. So that's kind of the way I envision it. The other way you can play it also is through something like a Freeport McMoran too, right? I mean, there's copper, and we know that copper goes into a lot of the infrastructure out there. So that's another idea out there.
You mentioned the executive team and execution. I will go ahead and admit that when I was younger, maybe like in college or so, I was like, execution team, management team, people talk about it. But as long as the idea is good, anybody can make it happen. As I've gotten older, as I've gone in the corporate world to work with people, and as I saw the CEO of Chipotle leave, go to Starbucks, and that stock kind of reacted, appropriately, some might say, it really does come down to who's the execution or who's executed the game plan. Warren Buffett has believed in that quite a bit as well. Let me talk to you about self-driving vehicles, especially because it sounds nice. It's great. It's supposed to lower how many accidents occur per year, hopefully lower how many deaths happen per year. But my concern is always the headline. God forbid this becomes a mainstream and someone passes away because a self-driving vehicle, even though the stats might be beneficial to having this technology, the headline would make it seem like regulation needs to happen across the states, across the country. What are your thoughts on the self-driving innovation that we may or may not see?
I think it's 10 years away. I really do. I mean, I think it's going to take that much time for the safety component, the accuracy component. And oh, by the way, talk to any insurance company. They're not insuring these companies. So that has to happen as well. And so I think, and then you get the government involved, and then you're kicking the can down a little bit later too. So I just think it's years away. Even the very, very best companies in the world are taking their time. They have no choice. Look at Apple. They closed down Apple Car, right? So because if they can't do it, who can do it? So I think it's just going to take a really long time. And you're right. We're only one headline away from people saying, never will I ever get in one of those.
And like what happens with lawsuits, right? You mentioned Apple, Project Titan, I believe is what they had.
Yeah.
And, something that I'll always mention is sometimes people forget how time really does fly. I remember when Project Titan, I think they said completion by, say, 2020. And I read the headline in 2016. And I was like, nobody's got time to wait 4 years. Here we are 8 years later. And they're like, you know what? Maybe not. Never mind. We won't do that.
Babe, by the way, back to your management comment, because I 100% agree with you in terms of, and you mentioned the Starbucks. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but I actually bought Chipotle on that news because
on the dip?
Yeah, on the dip.
Okay.
I bought it because and by the way, I mean, I think Brian Niccol is a rock star. He's the CEO that's going to Starbucks. I don't know if it's worth 24% in one day. However, but Chipotle, they do have a great bench. And that's what's really important. It's not just the CEO. It takes a team. And Boatwright is there. He's the interim CEO for the time being. The CFO actually is going to transition to be head of strategy. And then they promoted a new person to be CFO. So there's a lot of change going on there. But I do think it speaks to the depth of the team. And I think it's an opportunity in terms of the stock price.
I don't know if I'll ever play the C-suite of the publicly traded company, but the ego stroke of waking up and knowing that the stock just went up billions of dollars in market cap because you signed a document that said, I'll go ahead and head up the team is incredible there. Now, real quick, before I let you go, you bought CrowdStrike on a dip.
Yeah.
You bought Chipotle on a dip. We always talk about NVIDIA and how you openly say, hey, I missed a trade on that. NVIDIA, last time I checked, was trading at 106. Any chance there's a level that you may try to get in unless you're already in it?
I'm not in it. I'm playing it through Broadcom. That's how I'm playing the AI, as you know. I bought some more Broadcom last week because it's been very volatile. All of the semis have been very volatile. The problem with NVIDIA, though, Nate, is I just don't know who's left to buy it. Like maybe it's just me, and that could very well be. That could very well be.
You got 3.5 billion. I mean,
I know. I mean, it's nuts. But I do think. I do think there is going to be a level. We got to get through seasonally. September is a kind of a crummy month historically in the markets, and the growth is there, but it is on the margin slowing. Just law of large numbers, and so do I really want to fight that battle? Maybe, but I think you have to get it. For me, another 20% down.
Yeah, and I think I saw a headline. I couldn't verify, but you had someone high up in Nvidia that went ahead and left for AMD as well. So you also have those things to kind of worry about in terms of management. Stephanie, always a great conversation. Before I let you go, though, any other topics or any other picks that you want to discuss that I didn't get a chance to bring up?
No, I'm still a bull on housing, and I love the rates continue to come down. Mortgage applications now again up the last 2 weeks in a row. So DR Horton, Home Depot. In fact, I bought more Home Depot post the bad quarter, which was not a bad quarter. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And the stock, all it did since it reported, it went higher. So still like housing. I still like the consumer. Financials are acting well. So there's a lot out there to choose from beyond tech.
We did an Nvidia earnings stream, and then chat was like, "Hey, why is the stock going down?" Because they had beat EPS, they beat revenue, they had 50 billion of buyback, I believe, authorized by the board as well, and the stock still fell, from the day of reporting, and it fell 10% about give or take yesterday as well. So bad report, whatever. It's like art, always open to interpretation. Depends on who wants to buy it where. But Stephanie, always a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. That is Stephanie Link, Chief Investment Strategist and Head of Investment Solutions at Hightower Advisors. All right. Hopefully you guys got some great insights on how to play not just the EV sector, but the AI space as well, as she's playing it through Broadcom. And also if you want to play the grid aspect of things, because no matter if it's AI, that's going to have a lot of capacity and some demands, or if it's going to be EV or robotics or whatever the case may be, you're going to need more data centers. You're going to need to rely on the grids. And I think that's a great and smart way to play it as well. We're going to go ahead and continue the conversation that I had with Ivan from Tigress Financial. Check this one out. He's the CIO and Director of Research. Continuing the conversation in this space, we have Ivan Feinseth, who is the CIO and Director of Research at Tigress Financial. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
There's so much to talk about, so many different angles to kind of take up this EV conversation, but let me get your thoughts on the overall EV sector to start things off.
Well, it is exciting, but I think that the auto industry, both through the government mandates that were being talked about to be all EV by 2035, I think that has maybe pushed them to go to a too big a leap from ICE or internal combustion gas-powered cars to all EV. And the industry, I think, really has to go through the cycle of ICE to hybrid to EV. And we're starting to see that the auto companies are coming out with more hybrid gas-powered and EV-powered cars.
Yeah.
And we still need a charging infrastructure. I mean, that's the one thing that Tesla really has created, an incredible high-speed charging infrastructure, which they've also opened up to other car manufacturers, including Ford, GM, and Rivian as examples, and others too.
Yeah.
Because we need places to charge. We are also going to need to upgrade the power grid so they can handle people installing high-speed chargers in their homes. And so there's a lot of infrastructure and investment that has to be done. Yeah. The technology is great. That will continue to improve. I mean, over time, the batteries will go farther on a charge. They'll charge faster, but we're not there yet. And that's what's kind of holding everything back.
Yeah.
And the fact that even though global oil tends to go up and down with geopolitical events, oil is pretty plentiful, and for the most part, prices are stable, and that has kept us dependent on oil. I mean, we should have made this transition years ago, but it will happen. And the features and the EVs, including more advanced ADAS, automated driver safety systems, and eventual autonomous vehicles, it's all exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of long-term opportunities for investors to benefit from.
So let's talk about that. I kind of want to go rapid fire on a couple of tickers. But before I do that, what would you say is like your top pick in the EV sector then?
Rivian. And even though that's a pure EV play, they are in the sweet spot of the market with trucks and SUVs that are, been very well received, really high quality, feature rich. They have they are now on the Tesla charging infrastructure, but they have a very robust automated connectivity for software upgrades. You will see that the one benefit of an EV is that you can let your car, your car can be updated to the latest functionality through software-defined capabilities.
Yeah.
And that's a big positive, that you can keep adding new features to the firmware and software and get the latest technology in your car. That's really powerful. Also, Rivian has a backstop of Amazon. They are committed to supplying Amazon with 100,000 electric vans over the 10-year period since they made the agreement, which probably is 3 years ago. And even Amazon themselves has said that they will eventually be saving $3 billion a year in the switch to EVs. I mean, I see when the Rivian delivery trucks come to my neighborhood, it's exciting to see. I speak to the drivers. They love them because of the regenerative braking enables them not to have to keep moving their foot from the accelerator to the brake. It reduces driver fatigue. All the drivers love the EVs. And Amazon has been able to create their own infrastructure that, they get a full charge that lasts the whole day while their drivers deliver packages. And it does save them money between the maintenance and the fuel costs of the vehicles. And again, the Amazon investment and the Amazon vehicle commitment helps to give Rivian a backstop. And then recently, Volkswagen made a $5 billion investment commitment into Rivian. Again, a major backstop to both partner with Rivian in the development of of EV technology, and gives Rivian access to global distribution and a tremendous amount of cash. So I think financial EVs, Rivian's got a great product, a great backstop, a great product, and a really good growth trajectory with 2 new models coming out next year, the R2 and the R3, smaller SUVs.
Yeah. It's always good when you have companies such as Volkswagen, and then you also have Amazon kind of saying, hey, we'll go ahead and purchase what you've got, and you've got a dollar amount to put on it for the market to understand as well. Let's go kind of rapid fire on the other names that you didn't pick, as you picked Rivian over them. Give me your thoughts on Tesla.
Well, I do love Tesla. It's just, you got to love Elon. Everybody can call him Elon. You got to love Tesla, the vehicles. Everybody likes the cars. I mean, the issue of the volatility of the stock is tough to make, and the valuation. But I mean, they are on the cutting edge of autonomous, full self-drive technology. They are just very technologically advanced vehicles. They have the charging infrastructure in place. People, for the most part, that have Teslas love them. They've got a tremendous brand. So if you can stand the volatility of the stock and the high valuation, which will as the company evolves into an autonomous vehicle technology company, will pay off in the future. So I do like Tesla. And then my favorite automaker overall is GM. I mean, I like their product category. I think the CEO. I love Mary Barra. She's been a great leader and CEO of GM. They have a great product line that continues to get better and better with a lot of new vehicles coming. And they're returning cash to shareholders through their ongoing buyback and the dividend that they reinstated since the financial crisis, and then have started to increase. So they're returning, they're doing everything right. So GM, as far as an overall car company, is my number 1 pick. And then as far as an EV company, my number 1 pick there is Rivian.
Yeah, and I like the Rivian pick as well, especially from how much further down it has gone from its highs as well. Any other thoughts that you want to kind of share with our viewers, whether it's within this sector or otherwise, that you feel like they should kind of keep an eye out for? Any tickers? We always love trade ideas.
Okay, and NVIDIA is a play on autonomous technology. Well, they're on board on vehicles as it, they're one of the onboard computers on Tesla. They continue to expand their partnership with Mercedes. That again allows this over-the-air upgrade to increase functionality as through software-defined capabilities and eventual full self-drive technology. And then I love Mobileye, and so the issue with Mobileye is that the adoption for a lot of their technology is going to come from EVs. We saw this global, increase, decline in demand. It spiked and now it has slowed down. But when that starts to pick up, because some of their biggest customers are like Zeekr and Polestar and some of the Chinese and Asian EV manufacturers, but eventually they will get greater spend on board each vehicle and the increase in vehicle volume. So between their ADAS systems and their eventual autonomous driven systems, Mobileye down here around $14 is a tremendous buy.
I appreciate all your insights. I really like the Rivian pick. Again, like I mentioned, just from how off its highs it has been and beaten down as well. I think you've got great reassurances to possibly rely on, like you've mentioned, with Amazon and Volkswagen as well. Ivan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Ivan Feinseth, who is a CIO and Director of Research at Tigress Financial. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring on our next guest, who's going to be Will, who is the founder and chairman of Corestone Capital. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we've been having great conversations, great angles and insights from different ways to attack the EV space from a risk management perspective, from an outlook perspective, but obviously from an investment perspective as well. But before I get those thoughts from you, give me a quick brief overview of what is it that you do?
Sure. I've had a career up and down Wall Street. I had a debt fund with Avenue Capital. I worked at Goldman Sachs, where I managed the private capital of the partners at Goldman. I've done SPAC, buying banks in Africa. I've taken 2 ETFs public, one for Bitcoin, one for battery metals. And so listed businesses on 3 major exchanges and done business across 5 continents over the course of the past several years, and track the EV and kind of associated industries pretty closely. Personally invested at a venture level over 10 years ago in a battery business. So I feel like I track the industry quite closely and, you know, try to offer perspective on it where it's helpful.
So let's talk about, I think you formerly, you mentioned your history here a little bit, but you led an EMG Advisors, which provided investors with direct commodity exposure to the key automotive component side of things. How was that experience? And especially, you know, what can you mention in terms of, say, lithium, copper, and the other key components that are needed to power electric vehicles?
So whenever I look at a industry, I kind of try to make a decision individually how I want to participate in that sector. And so if you zoom out and look at, you know, major macro movements of the next 5 years, a lot of people talking about green energy, a lot of people talking about EV, a lot of people trying to figure out how to trade Tesla, and just more broadly trying to assess how to get a bet on the table in what should be a maturing industry. And so when I do that, I assess whether or not I want to make a direct bet at a venture level in a private company that I believe has competitive IP or a unique approach to the industry, and that, you know, I can participate at an early stage and get a massive return for taking that risk. Or do I want to be a minority passive investor, if you will, in a public company and just buy public Tesla stock, try to trade it when I think things are good, try to sell it when I think things are bad, and trade in and around a public name, have no say, no impact, no relationship, absent whatever I can read online or see on the television? Or 3, no, the only other angle which led me to that ETF was, you know, am I playing this the right way, or can I actually go a step removed into the supply chain and figure out, you know, a more neutral way to play the sector? And so that's what I decided to do in the EV space over the past several years, is I decided to say, you know, instead of betting, will Rivian make it? Will they survive? Will GM go fully electric? You know, instead of trying to speculate on that, what I do know is all EVs, all green energy, all solar, wind, whatever that might be, requires the same core commodities. So what I decided to do in this sector was bet on lithium futures, nickel, copper futures, and take a position in those, because under that premise, I don't have to bet whether or not a specific company is going to make it. I know that if any and all EV adoption occurs, that's going to drive demand for copper, cobalt, nickel, the underlying battery metals. And if demand for those rise, I should participate in that appreciation regardless of Tesla volatility, Elon buys Twitter, none of that stuff matters at the end of the day. The execution risk is gone if I just play the underlying commodity that rises regardless of who wins.
Yeah, and that's the best part about it is in terms of ETFs. Is that if you believe in the sector, if you believe in the technology and where it's headed, then ETFs are the great way to play it. I mentioned we talked to Stephanie Link earlier about how, whether it's in the space of AI, whether it's in the space of Tesla, or in terms of electric vehicles, you're going to need more grids. You're going to need more power. You're going to need more energy. And that's one way to go ahead and play the thing behind the thing as well. While we're on the subject of Tesla, I've been asking everybody this. What are your thoughts on, FSD? And do you think that that's something that is realistic in the next 5 years, 10 years, or do you think we're a long ways away from it as well?
I think we're closer and closer to it. My 7-year-old just started going to a school that's about 20 minutes away. And it's K through 12. And my wife said, well, one day he's going to be driving these windy streets to school. And I said, you know what? I don't think he will be. By the time he's actually going down that windy road to that school in the woods, I don't believe he'll be necessarily holding the wheel too often in his drive. And so, do I think that that's going to be 3 years from now? I'm not sure. Maybe for the early adopters and the tip of the spear. But, that is inevitable. That is where we're heading. And I think that that's a good thing, for us in terms of safety and security. And, when you play it, when you layer that into whether or not that's a Tesla trade, that's why I love Tesla as a company, is because it's way more diversified as a revenue stream business than people give it credit for. And so I'm not fully betting on, just like if I buy Ford Motor Company, I'm basically trading that there's going to be more sales next quarter than there were this. Whereas with Tesla, I'm buying a whole diversified set of revenue streams, one of which is FSD, that should that succeed as much as people believe it could, now all of a sudden that's a licensing opportunity. Now all of a sudden my Ford F-150 pickup truck has Tesla FSD technology, just like it has Sirius satellite radio. And it's not as much about, the exclusivity of Tesla having that as their ability to license those capabilities to others. And so people trade Tesla as an AI company too, because of the self-learning and the smart learning stuff that they're able to do and the innovation that's occurring in that business. So I always encourage people looking at Tesla to also zoom out and, think about it as more of a innovation hub that they're going to get diversified exposure to, innovation in many sectors truly. And not worry about whether or not they delivered, 97% of their cars last quarter.
I was talking to Justus a couple of interviews ago, and he mentioned how all of Elon's companies, they kind of complement each other, right? You have SpaceX, you have Tesla, then you also have, so many different things that he wants to focus on in terms of X itself, where they kind of complement each other in terms of data, information, technology, investment, AI. That's kind of where it is. Are there any hidden gems though in this space that you're a fan of? Right, I would say Tesla's winning, right, in terms of market share, where they're headed with technology. Are there any other hidden gems, whether it's a Rivian, whether it's a GM, whether it's a Ford, Lucid, that you're like, hey, these have a good shot to go ahead and catch up to a good degree?
I don't think so. I think the capital needs for the Rivians and the Lucids of the world to make it, when really their only proprietary IP is the badge on their hood. There's nothing special about their delivery except for the shape of their car, the colors they offer. Those are last 10% decisions. Yeah. The battery under the hood doesn't have better range or capacity. The FSD isn't more mature. And so those are bets that those companies are going to be able to access capital markets and survive long enough to be, the Ford of the 2050s. That's why I've chosen not to play those names. I do think that, playing Ford and GM and, Stellantis, those are companies that have commitments to EV. They are definitely backing off their speed of those commitments, but they're going in that direction. And so, their ability to mature their product offerings to offer EV and plug-in hybrids is great. And so I think that you're going to participate in EV adoption through owning those names as well. And they have existing brand loyalty. They have dealer footprint. They have service capability. They have production capability, they have supply chain shored up. And so I'd way rather, bet on their ability to broaden or mature their offering than a new entrant being able to compete. Now, Tesla's unique because they started so much earlier than everybody else. And while Ford waffles, Tesla keeps their head down. And, while Ford tries to retrofit older facilities to make new vehicles and to create battery technology that didn't exist, Tesla's starting from scratch. And so they don't have any of those legacy obstacles that the Ford and GMs of the world have. One of the great examples I think that Elon speaks to about Tesla is when they build new facilities, they're a straight line. And so the car starts at one end and gets built from left to right. Something so simple as that means that the speed they're able to move that car down the line is 10 to 15% faster. So just because he's building facilities long and narrow and not square means he can make a car faster. It's just a perfect example of not needing to change a legacy system to fit a new, delivery mechanism. And why I think, if Tesla can make cars cheaper and quicker, they can sell them cheaper with the same margin. And that's why I think you see some of the price wars happening already, because Elon's like, hold my beer, watch me deliver a car for 25 grand that is the same, and Ford can't make that car for less than 38 grand. I'm happy to compete with them at that level, or just they need to commit to lose money for a long time.
Your example of, the assembly line reminds me of how Wall Street, obviously you mentioned you've got experience there. They would want to make sure they have a direct line to the exchanges, not around the corner, bending it like a hose, direct line, just because those nanoseconds or whatever other seconds there are that I don't even know about matter so much in execution when it comes to the markets. That's an example that it reminds me of. Before let you go, I'd love to get your final thoughts on if there are any other ideas on how folks that are watching can maybe invest in, think about doing their own due diligence on outside of what we've already talked about here today.
Yeah, I always challenge people to just go a layer deeper than the cover. And so where you're going to hear, and why I respect and value the work that you guys do is because anyone could put on CNBC and watch a 3-minute clip that's going to just have some salacious headline at the bottom and encourage people to, buy or sell Tesla based on some, breaking news, fear, whatever.
Right.
So you either need to decide, I want to hold this name for the next 5 or 10 years and just think about it in that manner, or I want to zoom out and say, I want to own lithium futures instead of owning Rivian stock. Because if Rivian makes it, that drives lithium demand. If Ford makes it, that drives lithium demand. And so zoom out into the supply chain a little bit. You referenced some ETFs, which I think are really valuable retail tools. And I remember, early days in ETF that looked at iPhone supplies and said, hey, this is the company that makes the screens for iPhone, whatever that might be. And so if you believed that iPhone adoption was going to rise, you could own the company that has, the screen technology, the chip technology, whatever that is. You're seeing that happen with AI now, where people are just confused about how to play it. So they just buy NVIDIA, which, by the way, I think, has proven to work, but is also a vacuum of people rushing into a trade based on a theme and a supply and demand dynamic working in their favor. In the EV space, there are a lot of players, and I don't think you need to go out on the curve of taking the risk of a Rivian that might not make it, 2 quarters from now based on their cash balance and based on the, cost of capital in today's markets. You don't need to take that risk when you can just buy lithium, copper, cobalt futures, through an ETF and pay 50 to 75 basis points for somebody else to worry about it and just look away. Because, I think we all know and believe that 5 years from now, there'll be more EVs than there are today. And if you really want to do the work on the supply chain of those core commodities, where they're coming from, and the bottleneck of processing capacity, you're going to be even more excited about what that price activity could look like as that adoption curve steepens. And so I think that, that's a way to think about investing in sectors, which retail investors now can newly do. A couple of years ago, you couldn't trade, you and I couldn't trade lithium futures. We can't. But now there's wraps around ETFs that allow you to enable someone else to do that for you and get your 99.9% participation. And so I think retail should be tapping into those opportunities as an actually, safer way to play a sector.
Yeah, I think Sprott ETF is one that I typically use to kind of trade and also look at investing in the long term there as well, because they've got copper and nickel, I believe, as well.
Sprott has a good uranium one too, which we could spend a lot of time
yeah.
talking about. I think that's an interesting thing to track as nuclear energy rises.
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up, because that was I think it had a huge rally in uranium. I don't remember the exact time, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, because of the nuclear energy and everything happening in the world as well. Will, thank you so much for your time here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. That is Will, who's the founder and chairman of Corestone Capital. And that concludes our show here today. We hope you got not just some new trade ideas, but maybe got some different angles and viewpoints on the trade ideas that you already kind of had in mind. I think it's important to kind of look at the thing behind the thing. Yes, the Teslas are doing well, but outside of EV, what other exposure do they have, right? With technology as well, but who's making those software? Who's updating those softwares? Your vehicles are going to be the future, but who's making the tires? Who's making the rubber to support those tires? Finding out those companies and doing your due diligence on cash flow, listening to their earnings calls is always a great way to be more diversified, so that no matter who wins in the marquee in your face names, the sector itself does well, you will do well. And of course, check out the ETFs as well. And we appreciate you for joining. We hope you had a great time, and we'll see you next time.